Welcome. If you find yourself here, you've likely received your Les Paulverizer kit from the RATLab, the Les Paul Foundation, and our friends over at DIY Recording Equipment. So you will have gotten here by scanning the QR code that is on the back of this card, which leads you to this build instructions page. So we'll set that aside for now, and take a look at what unpacked from the kit. So you have a USB cable and a Arduino MKR Wi-Fi 1010 board. So this will be the brains of the Les Paulverizer kit. And the USB cable will allow for programming of this board via the Arduino Interactive Development Environment tool, as well as MIDI communication to your PC. So this will be in use later once the product is built, and we'll set that aside, and we'll keep the board aside for now. Also included are the circuit board that will then go into the enclosure and host our switches, potentiometer, and the Arduino board itself. So looking at the enclosure, it consists of a top and bottom, and it unpacks to reveal the solderable components inside here. So within this bag you'll have 4 key switches, and these are from our friends at Mode Designs. And these are a Cherry MX style switch, as you'd find in mechanical keyboards. So we'll set those aside. We have 2 14-pin headers, which will allow the circuit board to connect to the Arduino with ease, and a potentiometer. We also have 4 keycaps that fit onto the key switches, and we'll cover that at the end. So, and additionally, 4 resistors, and these are 1/8 watt, 1 kilo ohm resistors. So, in order to complete this build, you'll need solder, a soldering iron, and a pair of cutters. These are diagonal flush cutters, really any sort of electronic metal pliers will do. So, to jump into the build here, we're going to start off taking our enclosure top, grabbing a key switch and aligning it so that the 4 large identical holes are facing away from you, and grab your key switch and you'll see that there's a small embossed mode logo there. So rest this switch into the hole in the enclosure and push down with the mode logo towards the edge of the enclosure facing away from you. And that will snap just into place as so. And then repeat that for the other 3, all in the same orientation with the mode logo facing away from you. Alright, with those 4 there, we'll set that aside. And now we'll move on to our circuit board here. So, there are 2 sides to the circuit board, of course. The top side, which you'll identify by the silk screen that calls out the 4 switches, and the pot. So, as you can see, it says resistors, switches, and pot go on this side, and on the other side it says pin headers go on this side. So that's just a helpful hint. But the circuit board here will end up resting inside of the enclosure with the switches and pot facing out towards the top of the enclosure and the Arduino installing from the rear here. So let's get some components installed in here, starting with our resistors. So I'm going to cut these loose if they aren't already provided loose. And what we're going to do is just take one, grab the resistor, and sort of gently bend those leads like this so that the leads make a U with the resistor itself at the apex of that. So then you're going to take this and you'll see we have 4 spots for resistors, R1, R2, R3, and then at a 90-degree angle, R4 along the side there. So we'll slide that through here. Drops right into place. And remember, we're installing it so that the resistor is on the top side of the board. Hold that in place, flip it over, give the leads just a little bit of bend to prevent that from falling out. So we're going to repeat this now with the other three. All right, so with all of those in place, we'll check them to make sure that they're as close to the board as possible. And then we will solder all of these in place. Now we'll solder from the rear side here, which is typical of assembling through-hole components. Make sure that we get all 8 solder joints. Okay. Double check those, make sure nothing looks strange. We don't have excessive solder leaking anywhere, and that all the connections are made. And once you're happy with all of your solder joints, let's go ahead and clip off these 8 leads. Get that trash out of the way here. All right. Now we'll install the pot or potentiometer here on the top. So you'll see that it has these 2 metal wings here, which are mechanical clips to hold it into the circuit board. And those engage with these 2 holes right there. And then we have our 3 leads to the front. Now when you receive the potentiometer, these leads might be splayed out slightly from the manufacturer. So if they are, just bend those into vertical a bit, making sure that they all stay in a straight line. And that'll just allow a better fit to drop it into the board here. You may need to squeeze the metal clips in just a little bit to make insertion easier, but here we are again on the top side. It says pot goes here, so we're going to line that up and press it in, just like that, and you'll see those metal clips grab very solidly right away. So again, we'll go to the underside of the board and solder those 3 leads from the pot. Okay, with that completed, we're now going to install our headers on the underside of the board. Now this can be a little bit tricky because there is some movement that's allowed in the headers, so we're going to want to make sure that we install them perfectly vertically, or as close as we can get on the bottom side of the board here. So what we're going to do is, there's quite a few ways to do this, but what I'll do is take one, get a little bit of solder on the end of our iron, hold this in place with one hand, making sure that it's right where we want it. Pick up that solder, and we will tack one pin in place. That will hold that there while we attach the other one the same way. So I'm going to hold that in place, check our alignment. And add just a bit of solder to one of our pins. Hold that until the solder dries, or cools I should say. And now we have those just where we want them. And we now can go rest it down just like that and solder the rest of our pins. And always make sure that you go back and you clean up the first joint that you had tacked on there. Because the tacks tend to be ugly and electrically incomplete. That first one looks good. Move on to the next. So now, with our pin headers installed, we are going to install our circuit board into the enclosure top that has our 4 key switches in place. So take a look and double check that all of the metal contacts on the key switches inside the enclosure are vertical and nothing's been bent over. So that's looking pretty good now. And what we'll do is just hold the enclosure so that the open hole for the potentiometer is facing away from us. And take the board here, slot that right into place, make sure everything's lined up. Then just give that a press. And that last press, you're going to feel it make contact on all 4 of these corners. And you'll see these 4 posts that are in the middle of each key switch kind of come through the circuit board a bit. Once that feels like it's in there nice and sturdy, you can lay this down, and we're going to solder in the 2 contacts from each switch for 8 solder joints total here. So get in here and do that. Be careful when doing this to not touch the walls of the enclosure with the soldering iron, because the plastic will just go right ahead and melt if you do make contact with the iron. And speaking of which, we're actually going to use that to our advantage here to hold the circuit board in place a bit better. So just take the tip of your iron after you've cleaned it, and on the 4 corners of the board you'll notice that there's a little bit of a post sort of sticking up from the enclosure top through the circuit board. So one by one, we're just going to take those, sort of press them down with the end of the soldering iron, and these posts will sort of grab each corner of the circuit board then. And this will just provide a bit better of a mechanical hold, keeping everything in place for us. So, make sure you have a clean tip to your soldering iron again. And at this point, we can put the soldering iron away. So we're done with that. So next, we're going to unbox our Arduino. Now these boards in the box here are as you'd receive it from any hobby shop or online. And you'll see it's just the circuit board on this small piece of foam for shipping to protect these leads. And what we're going to have to do to prepare to install it in here is remove these metal tines sticking out from the bottom of the circuit board. So just one by one, and you want to be careful with your eyes because a flush cutter like this can tend to send these metal tines flying. So you can do something like this to hold them steady, or whatever you're comfortable with. But I'm just going to go ahead and shoot these at a backdrop. So now we have a pretty low profile bottom to the board, having clipped those off. And now what we'll do is take our enclosure top with the board mounted in there, and the Arduino board, just make sure you line it up so that all of the pins are properly aligned and you're not shifted in any direction this way. So you'll just take that and press it right in. And you'll be able to look in here, kind of down this way, and see that the board is fully installed onto those headers. So really that is the entire physical device here, with just the cover that you'll take the bottom of the enclosure. See this sort of groove in the bottom here. That'll take this shorter tab, so start with getting that side roughly into place, and then just press it in like that. And that will end up the flush surface down here. And the last thing is to take our key covers, key caps, and install those onto our key switches that are sticking out the top here. And there you have it. That is assembly of the Les Paulverizer from the RATLab, the Les Paul Foundation, and DIY recording equipment. Now, possible things that you can do to personalize this would be to swap out these key caps with any other keycap types. There's a lot out there, and they're easy sort of mounts to adapt as well. So you can really get personal with creativity there. You can add any knob that has a 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter hole on the back side to this to give yourself something more to grab onto. Or if you want to get adventurous, you can even swap out the key switches themselves for a different feel with any Cherry MX style key switch. So, enjoy your Les Paulverizer, and before you use this, you're going to have to program the Arduino, which will be defined separately, as well as get a hold of the Les Paulverizer Max MSP patch from lespulverizer.com. So thank you for watching, and enjoy your Les Paulverizer.